Hey, it is Sandy again, and we are going to do another one of my crazy quiz things, and this time it is going to be movies based on Lovecraft. And a lot of these are Lovecraft stories, but they aren't all. Some of them are just Lovecraft themes, Lovecraft ideas based on Lovecraft creatures, but all that's okay, because that's where it is. And I'm super excited to do this one, because when I was a kid growing up, there was literally one movie loosely based on Lovecraft, and it sucked. And then when I got into it, a teenager, there was a second movie loosely based on Lovecraft, which sucked, and that was it. And there was not movies about Lovecraft. And now we have a wide variety, and some of them are quite good. And so as before, we're going to look at the movies. I'm going to count to 3 or whatever, and then we're going to say what it is. But you probably know what this first one is anyway, if you know anything about Lovecraft and horror, because this is the probably most important movie in the development of the awesome Lovecraft cinema we have now. And when I was at a convention, Necronomicon, a few years back, they gave me an award for, I guess, greatness in Lovecraft, and it was a little metal image of Lovecraft, and I got the second one because the first one went to this guy, not this guy, Stuart Gordon, the director of this, because he did Reanimator, the first really good Lovecraft movie. And what they said was that the reason Lovecraft was famous now, which he hadn't been in the past, is from 2 things. One was that I had promulgated Lovecraft through my role-playing game Call of Cthulhu, and that had kind of seeped through nerd culture and gotten everywhere, and people knew about it and found out about it, and they all, even people that didn't play Call of Cthulhu, who played other role-playing games, knew about the legend of Call of Cthulhu. For example, I have it on good authority, i.e. straight from these guys themselves, that everyone at TSR Hobbies, who did publish D&D for quite some years, played Call of Cthulhu almost exclusively because they love Call of Cthulhu. So there you are. So I'm sure that informed D&D's adventures and stuff, which is fine. Now, Stuart Gordon's movies came through a different culture. They're going through like the movie geek culture, and people learning about that and seeing the movie stuff. And so both these things moved through the universe and made Lovecraft famous. And here is Reanimator, which made Jeffrey Combs a star. Did not make David Gale a star. He's the head in the jar, but he was pretty good in this. I liked it a lot. So Reanimator, based on one of Lovecraft's very worst stories, Herbert West Reanimator. But it doesn't really matter, because whether a movie's good or not doesn't always have to do with if the story is good or not. Okay, this is one from the 50s and 60s. It's Hammer, and I quite liked it because, Barbara Steele, she's a babe. This is from a possible dream sequence, and the movie is called The Crimson Cult. It's very loosely based on dreams in the witch house. Basically, whenever the guy goes up to the attic, there's a blue Barbara Steele in this awesome headdress, which I cannot get my wife to wear for the life of me, but boy, would I like that. The Crimson Cult, one of the older, not-so-great movies based on it. This is not, by the way, not the one I was referring to when I said there's only one Lovecraft movie growing up, because I didn't know about this one. But if I had, I would have watched it. Here is the one I was referring to, and that is Boris Karloff himself, who is, of course, a fabulous actor. And here he is trapped in this movie, which is 3, 2, 1. Die, monster, die. Very loosely based on the color out of space. Essentially, it turns out uranium makes you into a monster. And so that was cool. It does have Boris doing the things he used to do back in the mid-'60s, so there's that. And I still like the movie because of various details of it. But that was kind of the best we could do for Lovecraft for a long time. This is another good one. This is Brian Yuzna. And 3, 2, 1. This is Dagon, which is not based on Lovecraft's story. Dagon, though there is kind of a scene from it early on, it is based on his story, The Shadow over Innsmouth, and it's a really close adaptation of Shadow over Innsmouth. It takes place in Spain in a town called Imbolca, which means, in the mouth, so that was funny. But one of the things that's kind of cool about it is that that no one in Innsmouth ever blinks. It's always raining or drizzling there. It feels like Innsmouth, kind of run down and bad. He does make the creatures more like tentacly based instead of fish frog things. That's probably because it's harder to make fish frog things look good with special effects. Tentacles are easier, but whatever. It's still a great version of Shadow over Innsmouth. Okay, this is, again, not so great from the 80s, but it is a Lovecraft story, and a really obscure story at that. Although it's not a bad rendition of the monster as described by Lovecraft. And this is The Unnamable, which actually had a sequel, The Unnamable 2. And this is the titular monster, The Unnamable Thing, which in Lovecraft's short story, it has horns and it has hoofs, and it's part human, and this one got wings too, but it's kind of cool. The person that plays the monster in it, the lady that plays it, is a dancer, so she kind of brings some of that aspect to it. And one of the main characters is Randolph Carter, just like in the story, so I kind of like that. So The Unnamable. Maybe not great, but, it is what it is. So this was the Lovecraft movie that came out in when I was a teenager in the late 60s, early 70s, can't remember exactly. And it is, in fact, the Dunwich Horror. It's not super close to Dunwich Horror. Instead of a creepy 7-foot-high Wilbur Whateley, it has kind of a Rock and Dean Stockwell. Does have the giant monster, which you never get a good look at because there's all kinds of special effects. It does have something that really scared me as a kid, which is that whenever the monster's going around, you see it from the monster's point of view, and that always, for some reason, really creeped me out when I was a kid. Not so much now. You can see that the worshippers of Yog-Sothoth are, in fact, hippies, which actually totally makes sense. So... Okay, this is from 3, 2, 1. Bride of the Reanimator, which I was so proud he called it Bride of the Reanimator. And unlike a lot of movies called Bride or whatever, it really is, this is not the bride, right? But he actually builds a wife out of body parts, and it works about as well as you'd expect for Herbert West. Anyway, I like this movie too. It is not as great as Reanimator, but it is a lot of fun, and plus it has this little monster here who's adorable. This was that's Chris Sarandon, and the movie is The Resurrected, based on the case of Charles Dexter Ward, and it does it right. Quite often, film versions of the case of Charles Dexter Ward have it be some kind of, demonic possession or something of the guy, and that's not what it is. Joseph Curwen comes back physically from the past in the story, and, offs his descendant and just takes his place. And that's pretty much what happens here. So I liked it. It was brought into modern times, and they did a great job with the partial reanimated creatures. I thought they were really, I'm not showing one here because they're so cool. I didn't want to spoil them, but they're great. They aren't a really important part of the story, but they're there. So there it is. The Resurrected with Chris Sarandon. I liked it. This was the main Lovecraft movie I'd seen when I was a kid, and I had high hopes for it because it's got Vincent Price and it's got Lon Chaney, and, why would I not expect that to be good? And it is The Haunted Palace. So right off the bat, I'm thinking, oh, well, this is based on the Poe poem, The Haunted Palace. No, it's not. It's based on the case of Charles Dexter Ward. That's Charles Dexter Ward over on the side. And this is in fact, they do the possession thing where he's possessed by Charles Dexter Ward. They do have an invocation to Cthulhu at one point in it. And sadly, Cthulhu turns out to be a big green man. But, he doesn't show up very long. But they do it does take place in Arkham, which I liked, and Arkham, it looks like a bad place to be, and it's kind of okay. It's, I would say it's not as good as the real Poe movies featuring Vincent Price, whom I love unabashedly, but, you could do a lot worse. And it gives you an example of how Lovecraft was perceived before they really understood what Lovecraft was about. Well, this guy knows what Lovecraft's about. And there it is eating someone's head, because this is, of course, Stuart Gordon's From Beyond. And a very short story by Lovecraft that Stuart Gordon turned into a terrific riff on Things from Another Star and the Ultraviolet and all that stuff. And I really liked From Beyond. I'm sure everyone will. Plus it has Barbara Crampton looking really sexy, so that's always good. And this monster, so he's great. So this is another movie that's not quite so great, but it's from a story by Lovecraft, which again is also not that great, but it's been remade a bunch of times as movies, probably because it's a great idea for a movie. And this is, of course, 3, 2, 1. The Lurking Fear. And that's one of the fear things there in the back. Now, I think this is the version that has Adrienne Barbeau in it, who comes in with bombs to blow up the monsters, who are mysteriously lurking under a graveyard most of the time. They spend a lot of the time in a tomb, probably because it's cheap if you're filming all in one set. But of course, in the story, the lurking fear creatures are like all over the landscape, which is kind of neat, and I kind of wish they'd done that. But the creatures do look pretty cool, and they're evil, and so there's that. So, and here they're about to eat this guy, and he deserves it. Okay. Another favorite. This is actually from a story I like quite a bit, and you probably already figured out what the story is, because look at that guy there, and that is, of course, Brown Jenkin from The Dreams in the Witch House. And this movie is, again, by Stuart Gordon, and it is called Dreams in the Witch House. I think it's part of the horror movie thing, where they gave people basically $1 million to make a horror movie, and this is what he made. And it's not a bad Dreams in the Witch House. His Keziah Mason is kind of sexy instead of hideous, but, it is what it is. I guess he makes changes for the cinema, so there it is. At least his Brown Jenkin is hideous. Okay, this is one I'm guessing most people won't be able to get. Good luck. 3, 2, 1. And it is called Dark Heritage. It is not credited to the Lurking Fear, but it is totally the Lurking Fear, and it's actually one of the closest versions of it I've seen. They couldn't, I mean, the thing is zero budget, right? And he couldn't afford to make the actual tunnels that the things leave all over the landscape, but he does have mounds of dirt where they come up. So it's at one point the guy realized, because in the story there's a scene where he realizes that these ridges all over the landscape are actually the tunnels of the monsters going everywhere. And this guy realizes that the little hillocks of earth he sees everywhere are the monsters. So there's that, and it does play off into the he's related to people in the modern times, and there's that. So Dark Heritage, it's no budget, the acting's basal, but it's kind of interesting to see someone actually try to do the Lurking Fear pretty close, even if he didn't want to give it credit. Maybe he was afraid Lovecraft was going to sue him. This movie had a somewhat bigger budget, and it is a third version of 3, 2, 1. The Lurking Fear. It's Bleeders with Rutger Hauer, and his monsters are a lot more deformed. This guy's got 2 noses and 3 eyes, and he's pretty fabulous. And they're kind of pathetic, but so a lot of the story here is not so much about these things being evil predators that eat everyone, but on like the fact that people are related to them because of, the inbreeding thing. So, it had its points. But and again, Lurking Fear is there's still ground there for making another movie that would be good. So listen to me, movie makers. All right, so this is going to be hard to recognize because Lovecraft would never have had a cross in his movies. But this is, in fact, The Unknown Beyond, which is an Italian move by Ivan Zucco. And he really likes Lovecraft, and he's a pretty good movie maker and a good director. And tragically, his directorial style is absolutely the very worst for doing a Lovecraft story. It's more out in the open and direct. He's just like, he could make some really great horror movies, and he has made some, but when he tries to do Lovecraft, he's coming back to Lovecraft, and he just does not have the right chops to do Lovecraft scenes. Sorry, Ivan. I love you. I love your movies. I love the fact you love Lovecraft, but you got to find a different approach. But this one takes place in the future after the Great Old Ones have come back. You don't actually see Great Old Ones, but you see sort of the after effects. So it's kind of a weird artsy movie with zero budget, like, a lot of these guys have. But hey, if you're like me, you don't mind zero budgets. Unknown Beyond. Also a terrible title, but oh well. Okay, and this is the third in the series that we all know and love, which is, of course, Reanimator. This is Beyond Reanimator. It is kind of cool because it all takes place in a maximum security prison. Well, it's just a prison. And her hand's been possessed by the undeadifying stuff, so it's going crazy. And I love, like, one of the undead guys, when he turns, all he wants to do is do dope. One of them starts eating other. They're, like, all great. I liked it quite a bit. It has Herbert West in prison, which is doubtless where he belongs. And actually, I like all the Reanimator movies, but so you might want to take my recommendation with a grain of salt because I'm sort of the target audience for these things. They're gory, and there's Herbert West in them, and what's not to like. Okay, so yeah, this movie's in here because it has the title that is based on a Lovecraft thing, and it is called, by the way, you may notice that where this is looks like a warehouse or something, or a basement. It is clearly not in a tomb, because the movie's called The Tomb. They are not in a tomb. Zero of the dialogue and the events and the description is based on Lovecraft's story, The Tomb, which, to be fair, would be a very difficult movie to film. But, I mean, they just used Lovecraft's name, and it's not The Tomb at all. It's just a weird, artsy, no-budget movie with this doll head and this girl who has blood on her, and which I didn't like. I didn't like this movie. Maybe you will, but I doubt it. And it's not based on The Tomb. Okay, this is a scene from an anthology movie. I love anthology movies. And this is kind of the Cthulhu from the movie. Though I don't think they use his name, which is fine. And I like this movie a lot. And it is, in fact, called Necronomicon. And it has Jeffrey Combs playing Lovecraft in it. So it has 3 different segments. One of the segments is based loosely off the Whisperer in Darkness. It has space monsters taking over things. One of them is a brand. The one with Cthulhu actually has nothing to do with the Cthulhu. It's actually more like the House of Sounds, which is not a Lovecraft story at all. But it does have a pretty great Cthulhu resurrection technique. And the third story, it's actually, I think, the second in terms of, or first in terms of filming, is Cool Air, and it's a pretty close version of Cool Air. And Cool Air has been made for a lot of TV shows, like Night Gallery and stuff, because it's a nice, simple, straightforward short story. Although it's also a lot like The Facts and the Cases of Monsieur Valdemar by Edgar Allan Poe, so I'm not sure why they do that instead. But anyway, Cool Air, it's neat. And they have Cool Air in this too, so yay. Because Cool Air is a cool, fun story. Always deserves to be done more of. This is another Italian movie, because bless the Italians who like to make horror movies, and they don't get Lovecraft very well usually, but it doesn't matter because they're trying their hardest. And this is Dark Waters. Not to be confused with the Japanese horror movie Dark Water, which is totally not about Cthulhu at all. But in this, it's a convent and the nuns worship Cthulhu. This one, unlike Unknown Beyond, I kind of have a soft spot in my head for this one. Has some moments I sort of like. And it has a cult, so that's kind of cool. But again, not great. If you watch it and you say this has zero budget and the acting is not perfect and there's flaws, then I will not argue with you. I will just say that I have a low bar for enjoying a Lovecraft movie. And maybe you have a higher one. That makes you a better person, I guess. But it means I can enjoy more movies. Okay, so this is one step above The Tomb, and it is based on a Lovecraft story in the title, which is Beyond the Wall of Sleep. And it is similar to Beyond the Wall of Sleep in that it has a guy who's in an asylum. And otherwise, it is not based at all on Beyond the Wall of Sleep, except it has a guy in an asylum. It's black and white for some reason, and it has creepy, artsy things. It's kind of a good movie to have playing in the background while you're doing a horror game or something, because it has neat images that if someone glances over, they'll see it'll be creepy. But there's not really any kind of plot you can follow or anything that makes sense. It's just like a bunch of creepy images. Sort of like Last Year at Marienbad, which I also recommend highly as a great movie to put in the back. When you're having a Halloween party, get Last Year at Marienbad, put it on the big screen, have that playing constantly through your Halloween party. Everyone will be creeped out, and you won't have to watch it and try to figure it out, because you shouldn't. So this is from Japan. You can tell because they're schoolgirls, and only Japan makes movies about schoolgirls. And the movie is called, interestingly, Echo Echo Azarak, which is occult words that I will not go into the reference of now, but they're not from Lovecraft. And this is a girls' school movie about a Yog-Sothoth cult. And there's 3 Echo Echo Azaraks. Echo Echo Azarak, Echo Echo Azarak 2, and Echo Echo Azarak 3, and they have a Yog-Sothoth cult, and they sadly have a heroic girl who does good magic, which I always think is a weak thing, but hey, it's Japan, they can do what they want, and there is a Yog-Sothoth cult, so that's cool. You could argue that it's not really about Yog-Sothoth, it's about sorcery in a girls' school, sort of like what Harry Potter would be if you wanted to make a movie about magic in a school and you were Japanese. So hey, there it is. I kind of liked it. Also, one thing I've noticed in a lot of Japanese movies is that Western type occultism, when it shows up, is supposed to be extra creepy because I guess it's not like Japanese. Like one of my favorite Japanese movies, Tamami, the main guy has built a Western-style castle full of Western-style armor and Westerns. So this is like really exotic, creepy stuff, I guess, to the Japanese viewers, but, not to me. But the movie's still fun. So next movie, let's move on. Ooh. So you can see that someone has watched the Dr. Caligari movies, because this is based on it, sort of. But it makes sense that it would look like this, because this is the one and only film version of the Call of Cthulhu. And it was filmed as though they'd made it in 1927, which means it's silent. And this is, in fact, Roulier, with the non-Euclidean architecture, which plays into the story. It's by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, HPLHS. It's only like 45 minutes long, and because it's silent, it has every single language in the subtitles. Not the subtitles, it's silent, so the titles. So I recommend everyone check this out. It's the best version of Call of Cthulhu ever. It was made for like $50,000, but who cares, because it's super fun. The acting is good. The stuff is good. It's very accurate. So this is great stuff. And look how awesome Roulier looks. This is a movie, and you can see it looks depressing, and that of course means it's from France. So this is kind of a weird movie. It's not based on a specific Lovecraft story. It's called Malafiq, and it's a French prison movie. It's most of the time in prison, but they have a copy of the Necronomicon, and they're trying to use it to escape the prison. It's really weird, and I'm not sure if I can recommend it entirely, but if you want to see a French prison movie in which they use the Necronomicon to try to escape, this is where you should go to see that. So another Lovecraft movie that gets filmed a lot. Basically, there's three movies that get filmed a lot. There's The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, there's The Lurking Fear, and there's this one that gets filmed a lot, because I guess it has a good theme. And this one it has Will Wheaton in it. The Curse. Also has Claude Aiken. So this is based on The Color Out of Space. That's the meteor. I think they kind of did a bad job on the meteor. But again, in this one, it kind of gets into the water and turns everyone into like Colorado space monsters. It's kind of fun to see Will Wheaton doing a pretty good job as the guy trying to battle the horrors that are the Colorado space, and it accurately portrays people going insane and causing trouble and all the. It's not a great horror movie. It's not a bad Colorado space movie. But later on we surpassed it again with other better ones, but, don't be fooled by the beach ball. The movie's better than this scene. This is a movie I saw as a kid, and I thought it was a Lovecraft movie, but I was wrong, but it kind of is a Lovecraft movie, and yes, that's Oliver Reed back there. Pretty cool, huh? I love Oliver Reed. And this, which interestingly, I got introduced to him in a movie called Oliver, not about him, but it's about Oliver Twist, but he was Bill Sikes, and he was a great Bill Sikes. So this is the movie The Shuttered Room, which is actually a story by August Derleth. But what the heck? He was making it in original Lovecraft. Sadly, this movie does not have the frog monster in the attic, but The Shuttered Room is like August Derleth's take on Jane Eyre, I guess. And this is sort of that too, but it has Oliver Twist. He's a bad guy, like he often was in the 60s, and serves him right. So there it is. And here we go with another of those awesome movies. This is, I think, maybe the best version of this plotline of Lovecraft, and this is Die Farbe, which is yet another Colorado space movie. This one set in Germany, actually before and after World War II. His technique to show the color was that he had the movie be black and white, except for the color, which you can see here. So I guess that works, So that is Die Farbe. I liked it. I think it's the best color out of space so far. The director is Ha Jin, who's working on a Dreamcast of Unknown Kadath movie, and I wish him well for that. This is a creepy movie my son put me onto, and it is not directly based on a Lovecraft story, but it's pretty scary, and it is in fact Banshee Chapter, and it's sort of loosely based on From Beyond, but it's very Lovecraftian, and the walls of the universe are breaking down, and there's a scientific, like a government project, which is making a big mistake by going into it, and which I guess is really what Stranger Things is about too, but this is like a creepier version of that, and so sadly it's got a title that makes it impossible to tell what the movie's about from reading it. I don't know why directors do that. Unknown Beyond, Banshee Chapter, come on, it's something like The Curse tells you what it's about, Something like Absentia tells you what's about Banshee Chapter. Well. Anyway, I like this movie. And there it is. This is a movie that a very good friend of mine whose opinion I respect hates, but I loved it. So, sorry, Sean. I like this movie. I don't care what you think. Even if it's all pink, it is the color out of space. And look, they spelled it without a U because they aren't Lovecraft. And it's got Nick Cage, whom I actually adore. And I know, yes, he can overact. I know everything. But, I thought this was a fine color out of space movie. And not as good as DeFarba. But hey, if you want a mass market Nick Cage starring Lovecraft movie, this is the go-to place. I hope they do more. Lovecraft spelled it O-U-R. He knew how to spell color. He just wanted to seem like a good... He once said that he was a loyal subject of King George. So I guess he didn't like King Edward or the later King Georges. I think he was referring to the old King George III, who is not a good person to be a subject of, but oh well. Lovecraft's politics are not why I read him. Okay, this I also quite like. It's based on a story by Stephen King called Grandma, but it's not called Grandma. It is called Mercy. And Hastur does show up in it, and it's got this awesome book that helpfully says witchcraft right in the front cover. And one of the things I really like, actually has a shout out to Yig too at one point early on. What I like about it is that the Grandma Mercy is a cultist, and she is totally evil. Her grandson totally loves her. She loves the grandson, but there's bad things going on. And anyway, I liked Mercy quite a bit. It's not based directly on any Lovecraft story, but it shows what the world would be like, at least what things effect there might be if someone actually tried to worship one of these entities and get the benefit of it, and what good and bad things that would entail. So Mercy, recommended by me. This is the better-known Lovecraft movie that everyone has been talking about for a while and saying, oh, you should see this movie, it's all about Lovecraft. And it is, and I liked it too. I don't need to say much about it because you've probably seen it because it's The Void. And Shub-Niggurath might be in it. Anyway, it couldn't exist without Lovecraft. It's about a cult, which is good. I always like movies about cults. And they do it. It's perfectly good. The only reason I'm not praising it more is because I think you guys have probably seen it. And if you haven't, well, why haven't you? This I quite liked. It's a no-budget movie. It's hard to find on Amazon unless you type in extra words, because it's called Absentia, which there's a TV show now called Absentia, which is much more popular, but this is the movie called Absentia, and it is completely based on Lovecraft's themes of something from another universe impinging upon ours. It's not a specific Lovecraft monster, but it feels Lovecraftian with that theme. And that was my tagline, push the love of Lovecraft. She's looking for her missing husband. She's fallen in love with the cop that helps her find him. In the meantime, there's sort of a love triangle going on. Plus there's a monster. So, it's good. I also like the fact that she's not an amazing raving Hollywood beauty. She looks like a real person, which is cool. This is this is a Lovecraft story that you never see filmed. And they actually went ahead and filmed it, and it's a short. It's 20, 30 minutes long. I think it's in an anthology. The other two things in the anthology aren't Lovecraft, but this is. And that's Jeff Coombs about to get himself hanged. He's committing suicide in the movie because of reasons. But it's the evil clergyman. And no one ever sees the evil clergyman or talks about it. And maybe because it's not a very Lovecraftian story, I guess. It's kind of weird to say because Lovecraft actually wrote it. But it doesn't seem Lovecraftian because, the curse is weird and, I don't know, he's just having fun, I guess. Anyway, the evil clergyman, and there's a movie version of it. So there you go. And, of course, saved the best for last. This movie has an extremely handsome executive producer who's super nice and charming and everyone loves. It's also the best version yet of The Whisper in Darkness. And my credits on this movie, I'm not only the executive producer, but I'm also the brain cylinder test specimen at the end. Now, this guy on the right plays Wilmarth, and the guy on the left is one of the cultists, but he doesn't like it and he wants to get out of being a cultist. I really like this movie, and I can say it even though I'm executive producer, because it turns out that my role as executive producer was to give zero creative input to the movie at any part. Every single part of it was done by other people, and not by me, so I can praise. When I praise it, I am praising them. The only credit I get is I was smart enough to see the movie was cool and to give them some money to finish it, which money I mostly lost. It wasn't their fault. An evil film distribution company in Canada took a bunch of their movies and then went bankrupt after selling them, so they never got the money and they couldn't sell movies to the guys they sold it to. And it was, I feel sympathetic because this happened to me with my French Call of Cthulhu Wars game. There it is, Whisper in Darkness. I really liked it. Go buy it, and if you do, I think I get like 50 cents a copy or something to help make up my loss for doing this game. But it's a good version of Whisper in Darkness. I will say this about this movie, that the first hour of it are very close to the Whisper in Darkness, except they have more people talking to each other than just reading letters back and forth, because it's a movie. You can't really have the letters do all of it. And then at the climax of the movie, which happens an hour in, which is the climax of the story, then they go on beyond that, which I think a movie needs, but a story maybe not. So there's that. So there you have it. And this is this is not exhausting the topic of Lovecraft and Lovecraftian movies by any means. Lots of them. I mean, there's 33 movies in there you can go check out. You know, maybe some of you want to check out after I gave them kind of weak praise. But you know, you can find more on your own. And if you have others you really like, let me know in the comments column down below. We'll look at them, and if it's something I haven't heard of, we'll check it out together. Signing off, it's Sandy Petersen.